Today we're diving into an incredibly fascinating framework by theorist RJ Starr, and honestly, it completely flips our modern understanding of emotional intelligence right on its head. If you spend literally any time online these days, you know our social media feeds are just absolutely flooded with therapy speak. So, if you've ever felt like this modern push to constantly name your truth is actually causing way more problems than it solves in your daily life, you are going to absolutely love this.
Okay, let's dive into this, because this question challenges a massive cultural assumption. We are constantly told that unfiltered emotional expression is the ultimate form of authenticity, right? The prevailing logic is basically that if you don't immediately share every single fleeting frustration or annoyance, you're somehow being inauthentic or suppressing your true self. We're taught that hiding absolutely nothing means you are highly evolved. But what if that widespread belief is just entirely wrong?
Section 1. The emotional honesty boom.
Modern culture heavily promotes naming our feelings as a sign of supreme psychological health. And look, it's really important we validate the core of this first. Emotional honesty is simply accurately identifying and expressing what you feel. For a lot of people, especially if you grew up in an environment where your feelings were completely dismissed, ignored, or even punished, learning to finally name these internal states, that is a genuine and highly necessary developmental achievement. It's a massive step forward in taking up space in the world.
Because of that, we hear this mantra everywhere. Say what you feel. Name your truth. Get it out. It's offered as advice, as a virtue, as evidence of personal growth. We basically treat it like an emotional superpower. But RJ Starr points out that blindly following this mantra actually leads to incredibly chaotic and damaging interactions in our relationships. Why? Well, because emotional honesty is really only a raw material. It's a starting point. It is not a finished skill.
Section 2. Honesty versus maturity.
And this brilliantly illustrates the fatal flaw in treating mere expression as the final goal of our emotional development. Honesty basically stops at the first question, what am I feeling? But maturity asks a much harder second question, what do I do with this feeling? The problem with modern culture is that it almost always stops at that first question. We operate under this dangerous assumption that every intense feeling automatically deserves immediate airtime, completely regardless of the context.
To bridge that gap between feeling and reacting, we need what Starr calls emotional containment. It's the capacity to hold an emotion internally without it just leaking out all over the place. And we all know what a leaky emotion looks like, right? It's the passive-aggressive sigh during a morning meeting, the sharp tone you use with the barista, or slamming the door when you get home. It is absolutely crucial to understand that containment is a developmental skill. It is not suppression, it's not denial, and it's certainly not numbing. Containment simply allows a vital breath of space between a feeling and an action.
This beautifully breaks down the modern myth that authenticity requires full transparency at all times. You can possess complete internal truth, knowing exactly what you feel and honoring it, while still practicing external responsibility. You are allowed to choose silence. You can choose timing. You can choose privacy. You can be 100% internally honest while remaining externally restrained. And honestly, that is where true power lies.
Section 3. The trap of emotional offloading.
All right, this brings us to the emotional climax of Starr's framework. What exactly happens when honesty completely lacks containment? So the crucial point is that a lot of what we proudly call vulnerability or truth-telling is actually just emotional offloading. We feel uncomfortable inside, so we aggressively move that feeling outward as fast as possible to get relief by transferring it to someone else. It's basically an emotional discharge that we've successfully masked as honesty.
Starr uses an incredibly evocative metaphor for this. We treat our discomfort like a hot coal. Instead of holding it and letting it cool, we play this terrible game of emotional hot potato. By immediately expressing every raw emotion, the goal is simply to stop our own hands from burning by dropping that hot coal right into someone else's lap. It unfairly forces the people around us, our partners, coworkers, friends, to absorb, soothe, and regulate emotions that they didn't even generate in the first place.
Before you speak, ask yourself, is this mine to carry, or is this something that truly needs to be shared? Think about that for a second. Starr argues that many of the emotions we experience daily are actually meant to be metabolized internally. They soften with time and distance, but when we externalize them way too quickly, before we even understand them ourselves, they harden into concrete conflicts.
Section 4. Regulate before you communicate.
So how do we actually organize our emotions? Well, emotionally mature communication is regulated. Timing matters immensely. A feeling expressed in the heat of activation is entirely different from the feeling that emerges after you take a walk, sleep on it, or simply let your nervous system settle down. By pausing, you're transforming a loud, messy, raw signal into thoughtful, integrated meaning. And crucially, you replace absolute, aggressive certainty with genuine curiosity.
Let's move to and see how this builds in practice. Step 1 is the raw expression. I feel angry. That is loud certainty. It demands attention. But step 2 is the mature articulation. I am noticing anger, and I want to understand why. You can instantly hear the evolution of the language here, right? It shifts from a reactive demand to a deep, curious maturity. The words might be quieter, but the interpersonal impact is just so much deeper.
This perfectly highlights the shift from being entirely self-focused to developing real relational awareness. Emotional honesty centers strictly on what's happening inside you. Emotional maturity, however, includes the context and the other person. Who is this for? Why bring it up right now? If you're venting to your partner the absolute second they walk through the door from a super stressful job, are you centering your internal experience, or are you including the context of their long day? Is your goal to genuinely connect and solve a problem, or just to relieve your own internal pressure? If we completely ignore that context, we get the collateral damage of unfiltered honesty. Their reality is a wrecking ball they have mistaken for a gift. They walk away feeling cleansed while we are left to sweep up the glass. Oh man, we have all been on the receiving end of someone just being real with us, only to realize they were really just using us to emotionally cleanse themselves. They walk away feeling great while we're left dealing with the destruction.
Section 5. The quiet strength of maturity. This is the difficult but ultimately highly rewarding transition from mere expression to true emotional adulthood. Starr points out that maturity can actually feel a lot like uncomfortable suppression at first, especially if you were raised in an environment where any expression at all was forbidden. There's a real grief to maturity. You have to willingly give up the immediate dopamine hit of a sharp comeback or the rush of being the most wounded person in the room, in exchange for the slow, quiet satisfaction of keeping your relationships intact. It's the path to emotional continuity, rather than constant erasure and rebuilding.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how this framework completely redefines what is real. Authenticity is not measured by volume. It's measured by coherence. Emotionally mature people might actually seem much less dramatic or performative than what our culture tells us is authentic. But they aren't empty. They possess an incredibly powerful, integrated steadiness that makes them genuinely safe to be around.
To summarize, emotionally mature people absolutely still feel deeply. They aren't robots, but they do not outsource their emotional regulation to the people around them. They possess the wisdom to know which feelings desperately need a sit-down conversation and which feelings literally just need a good night's sleep to digest. They wield their emotional power with strict containment to build lasting trust, remaining deeply honest without ever being reckless and expressive without being intrusive.
I want to leave you with this defining thought from RJ Starr's framework. Emotional honesty opens the door. Emotional maturity decides how and when to walk through it. It responds with deliberate care rather than just impulsive reaction. So, the next time you feel that urgent, burning need to immediately name your truth to someone, take a breath and ask yourself, are you just dropping a hot cold to relieve your own discomfort, or will you have the strength to contain the heat, truly understand the feeling, and build a lasting connection? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I hope this framework empowers you to cultivate that quiet strength and keeps you profoundly curious about your own psychological architecture. See you next time.